Hello everyone, welcome to Easy Economics. How are you all doing? I hope you all are doing good. Well, today I brought for you all some key tips to ace your 9708 paper 2 essay responses. Today I brought for you all May June 2023 9708 variant 21. We'll be looking at a question from section B. We'll be looking at the responses written by a candidate. What was the examiner's point of view regarding the responses the candidate produced, and what actually have or is to be written in the answers or in the responses in order to score max. So let's see what this question has for us today. The question says, first, it's an 8 marker. It's an essay question. The question says, with the help of a diagram, explain the difference between the causes of a movement along and a shift of a PPC, and consider which is likely to have the most immediate impact on an economy. Now, it's an 8-mark question. It's asking us to explain how, with the help of a diagram, distinguish between what causes a movement along the PPC, what causes a shift of the PPC, and then explain either of out of it, whether a shift or a movement along has a more immediate impact on an economy. So now it's an 8-mark question. In order to produce an effective 8-mark answer, there's a certain criteria prescribed by the CIE. We need to adhere by it, and we need to satisfy all the 3 assessment objectives. It's an 8-mark question. So 3 marks would be for assessment objective 1 for knowledge and understanding. 3 marks would be for analysis, and the final 2 marks would be awarded if you evaluated using a valid judgment on whether a movement along or a shift of a VPC would cause the most immediate impact on an economy. So let's see first what the candidate wrote in the paper, and then we'll see what marks did that candidate score and what would have been written in order to score even better. All right, so the candidate began by writing that a PPC is a diagram that represents the output of an economy given its current resources and state of technology. Now, if we were to write the definition of a PPC, what we could have written, that PPC is a graph of the combined maximum possible output of 2 products an economy can produce efficiently with the given amount of existing resources and technology, right? And it shows how much of a product must be given in order to produce more of the other. We could have written this as well. Now, further, the candidate then drew this PPC curve. On the vertical axis, good A is shown, on the horizontal axis, good B is shown, and then there are particular positions in the PPC that are being displayed. PPC points outside the PPC, point inside the PPC, and there are 2 points on the PPC. Now see what is written further. The PPC curve could be at point A or C, which shows that the economy is using all its resources efficiently, while at point B, it means it is not using its resources efficiently. So this means the candidate further went on explaining what it means by being on the PPC. That means there is efficient utilization of resources, plus any point inside the PPC means inefficient allocation of resources or underutilization of resources, right? Further, it says For the point to move along the PPC curve, this would be caused by improving or increasing the resources used to make the goods given. For instance, to move from point E to point F, you would need to reduce the production of TVs to reach full production of cars. So now again a second PPC is drawn by the candidate, and now on the vertical axis he is displayed cars, on the horizontal axis TVs are displayed, and a sort of a schedule is given. Um, Certain figures are given in order to show how much of each type of good must be given up in order to produce more of the other. So further it says, therefore the reason we have movements along a PPC curve is because the economy is changing the amount of factors of production it uses, creating more land, the car industry to have more factories, to make cars means less land for TV factories. There's an increasing opportunity cost. When it comes to shifting the VPC, it will be different. Shifting the VPC involves improving the quantity and quality of factors of production. Now, the candidate is trying to draw a distinction between what it means to be on the same curve, but we are moving along the curve, right? Being on the same PPC, movement along the curve means you are producing more of one and foregoing one. So there is an opportunity cost involved. So it's a little vague, but the point is there. And further, the candidate says, but moving on to another PPC or a shift of the PPC means either there's an improvement in the quantity or the quality of the factors of reduction. This means, for instance, for capital, government spends more money to have advances in technology. The output can be potentially achieved, shifting the PPC outwards. And now the candidate has shown this graphically as well, showing that more of both goods are being produced, more of cars and more of TVs. So this shifts the curve to the right. Shifting the curve to the left requires the opposite, such as decreasing the amount of labor and decreasing capital. So what could we have said? That movement along the PPC means that you are foregoing one for increasing the production of other. It involves an opportunity cost. It involves a trade-off. But when we are talking about a shift outwards means there's an increase in the productive potential or in the increase in the capacity, or there's economic growth. And how could it be achieved? Either by increasing the quantity or the quality of the factors of production. Either more people have entered the workforce, if you're talking about labor, or there's better technology. That means what? You're producing more output per unit of input, right? Advancements in technology. But if there's a famine or there are wars, what would it cost? It would cause the entire PPC to shift inwards towards the left. Now, the conclusion given by the candidate. What does the conclusion says? In conclusion, I believe shifting the PPC has more of an impact on the economy as an increase or a decrease in total output is a decrease or increase in GDP. If GDP were to increase, this leads to economic growth and the economy will be more developed. So now if you look at the conclusion is a little vague. But the question was asking us to distinguish whether the shift or whether the movement along. Either one has more of an immediate impact on the economy. But now you look at the answer given by the candidate, it does not addresses towards the needs of the conclusion. As a result, now what has this candidate scored? What do you think would have been the candidate's score after producing this response? The examiner gave him a 6 on 8. As far as assessment objective 1, the knowledge and understanding, the examiner commented saying that yes, there were signs that the candidate was able to produce an understanding of the movement of the PPC. right? So he had sufficient knowledge and understanding, showing a movement of the VPC, showing a little trade-off, talking about yes, it involved opportunity cost, plus drawing of the VPC curve, shifting it outwards, carefully demonstrating it, and distinguishing between a shift, talking about that more will be produced when there is an increase in the quantity or the quality of the factors of reduction was shown, right? So, as far as assessment objective 1 and 2 was concerned, the candidate was able to score full on these two parameters. But when assessment objective 3 was there, in which the candidate was asked to evaluate, so knowledge, understanding, and analysis, as AO1 and assessment objective 2, the candidate was able to score 6. But when we talk about evaluation, in which maximum he could have scored 2, he was unable to produce a sound evaluation, and as a result, he got a 0. That's the reason why he scored a 6 on 8. So now what could he have written as far as the evaluation is concerned was, he could have written that while movements along the PPC affects output immediately, shifts in the PPC is for the long-term growth, right? So the impact would be slower, but in the long term, it would create a more impact, but in the short term, it would create an immediate impact. Why? Because it depicts switching priorities, right? The government switching priorities, right? It shows instant decisions. So that if you want to assess immediate impact, so that's depicted by movement along the PPC. But a lasting impact is caused by a shift of the PPC, because although it's slower, because it takes education and technology and investment, right? And that takes time. So this is how he could have improved upon his evaluation and perhaps scored an 8 on 8. Now let's move to the 12 marker, part B. So this is how the examiner wanted us to write. 1 mark was given for a correct understanding of the VPC, like I explained. 1 mark for the correct labeling of the axis. 1 mark for showing a trade-off. So assessment objective 1, this is how the breakup of assessment objective 1 is. The breakup of analysis was when we showed, yes, it involved an opportunity cost, showing by increasing the quantity of the quality, the shift, allowing to produce more of each type. And finally, evaluation, when we wrote a valid statement, like I just explained, and then we brushed it off with a strong conclusion, right? All right, now let's move on to part B. Part B says it's a 12 marker. Now, the answer writing strategy to this is a little different from part A. It says assess whether education should be classified as a public good rather than classified as a merit good. So now it's a 12 mark. How are marks awarded? 8 marks is for assessment objective 1 and assessment objective 2. That is for knowledge and understanding and analysis. There are 8 marks. And full 4 marks are for your evaluation. So for a 12 mark response, your evaluation needs to be really strong, and you need to really produce a coherent, valid judgment and a strong evaluation in order to score high. So let's first see what this candidate wrote. Now this answer was a little weak in comparison to part A. Part B was weaker and vague as well. So the candidate was not able to score in this part I'll read a few lines and then we'll see how we could have written it instead. A public good is a good that is non-excludable and non-rivalrous. It is also provided by the government. Example, street light, a merit good is a good, though thought to be desirable but underprovided. Example, books. Education can be classified as a public good as it is considered to be non-excludable, meaning non-rivalrous. One person getting education doesn't prevent another person also getting education. This is what the candidate is saying. It can also be classified as a public good due to being able to provide it by the government, what we call public schools. However, this may not apply fully because there are also private schools. Private schools can be excludable and non and rivalrous. If you don't have money to go in the school, that prevents you from using it, but also you have enough money, limited supply of spaces in the school. Education can also be classified as a merit good due to being desirable, as many people want education for better lives or jobs. It is also underprovided, as some countries do not have strong economies to be providing long lasting schools. The government may not have the money for that, and it leads to education being underprovided. More could be developed and have enough money to make schools and more. In conclusion, I believe education should be classified as a public good as the demand for education is still high and provided by the public sector, so it would be focused on making profit like the private sector. So it wouldn't be focused on making profit like the private sector, and it will help economy grow in the long run. So now if you look at the candidate's answer, there are certain elements, certain evidences of that gives you glimpses of whether the candidate had a clear view of what a public good is or what a merit good is, and how would you classify whether education is a public good or a merit good. So you need to be transparent and crystal clear in your concepts and definition first. First, you tell me what's a public good and what's a merit good. You see, a merit good is a good we all know that is being underconsumed or is underprovided if left on to the market forces. Why? Because the consumers are unable to understand the merits, and that is why they underconsume it. And the private sector, if you leave it entirely onto the private sector, so it is underproduced. So there must be some certain form of government intervention. To if you look at one aspect, education would be a public good if it is heavily subsidized or if it is provided by the government, or in economies in which only the state provides education, or in which there is 100% of the population is highly educated. So then it's entirely the responsibility of the state to provide. But then it doesn't fully meets the criteria of being a public good, because a public good is a good which has two key character traits. And what are those? Non-excludability and non-rivalry. That means you can't exclude people from consuming it, right? And one person's consumption does not reduces the availability for the other person, right? But when we talk about education, it's a merit good, right? It's a merit good. And it can either be provided by the state and it can also be provided by the government. So now let's look at what was the candidate score. The candidate scored a 2 on 8 on assessment objective 1 and assessment objective 2. And what were the examiner's comments after reading this response? The examiner commented saying that there were no grasp of the difference between the public and the private goods. You see, it's a lot of, it's a vague answer, right? There's lack of clarity. It shows confusion and the thoughts are not organized, the answer is not developed. And further, education is being categorized as a public good. So that's where the candidate went wrong. So 2 marks are being awarded to the candidate because there was certain development and identification of merit good. Education being considered as merit good. as far as assessment objective 3 was concerned, in which the candidate was asked to evaluate and provide a valid judgment, he scored a 0 because there was no evaluation. So now, in order to meet the CIA's requirement to answer this part, to meet assessment objective 1 and assessment objective 2, and to score an 8 on 8 on meeting these two criteria, first we'll say education should be classified as a merit good since it is a private good. It has got features of rivalry and excludability. It can also be provided by a market, right? So this means we can charge a price for it. It can be provided either by the government or the private sector. A public good is a good that has got features of non-excludability and non-rivalry. It makes it difficult to be charged for. It also has a problem of free rider, right? So you can't stop people from using it. There always be people who would not pay for it and consuming it. That is why it's being provided by the state, and private sector has no incentive in order to provide a public good. So this is what you had to write when you are talking about a 12 marker, and when we are talking about assessment objective 1, that is knowledge and understanding and analysis, right? Now let's talk about how you had to evaluate. What would you say in your evaluation? That merit goods are underconsumed and underprovided if left on the free market forces. Therefore, there needs to be certain form of a government intervention in order to ensure that the consumers fully understand the positive externalities of consuming of consuming merit goods such as education, because it leads to what? More skills, higher productivity, right? More mobility, growth, economic growth, higher standard of living. Public goods are only provided by the state or the government. If market demand for education is low, then it can be solely provided by the government. Finally, you would say in your evaluation that education is a merit good and not a public good. How could you have finally given your evaluation? You could have said that education is best classified as a merit good because it is underconsumed in a free market and it generates a lot of positive externalities. Although it shares some features of public good when it is being heavily subsidized or provided by the state in nations when it's highly educated, but it does not fully meet the criteria of non-rivalry and non-excludability, which makes it classified as a merit good and not a public good. This is how you need to produce a strong, well-balanced 12 marker essay question. I hope you understood and enjoyed solving this question with me. Stay tuned, subscribe, happy learning.